this part will be recorded, but unfortunately we missed the previous part. Okay, that has been deleted somehow. So I'm sorry. I told you this will be the issue today. So anyway, I was telling you guys that the same fact can lead to both a tort as well as a crime. Okay, so what is essentially the difference between tort and then crime then? Okay, so as we started with defining tort as a civil wrong. Okay, so tort is a civil wrong, whereas a crime is not a civil wrong, it's a criminal act, isn't it? So that's the difference. Okay, so that's not sufficient. I'm just using the different words here. It does not convey anything more than that. So what's the difference then? So difference is that in case of tort, the right that is infringed is a private right. Okay, so for example, I have a right that my property is not interfered with, that my property is not trespassed by anyone. So that's a private right that I have. Okay, so I as an individual private person, I have a certain right as against everyone else in the world to not trespass my property. So that right that I have is private right. Okay, with respect to my reputation, for example, I have a right that my reputation is not slandered. Okay, that I am not defamed. So that's a right that I as an individual have as against the rest of the world. Okay, so if the right is of such sort, okay, along with other definitional characters that we have discussed, okay, if such a private right is breached, okay, so that will be a case of tort. Okay, but then you have to fulfill other requirements as well. Okay, so tort is an infringement of a private right. Okay, whereas in case of crime, there is something called public right and duty. Okay, so how could there be a public right? It seems unimaginable, or is it? The understanding here is that it's not individual, but the public as in general also have certain rights. So for example, you to be able to understand, you have to look at this idea from social contract and other perspective. Okay, that philosophers like Hobbes, John Locke, who said that we left the state of nature, entered into a social contract. Why? So that our right to life, or in case of Locke at least, okay, our life, our liberty, and our property is protected by the state that we are, by the civil society that we create through the social contract. Now that civil society that we have, let us assume that the state is that case, state is the civil society here. It takes up a responsibility of protecting not just my property, not just your property, but everyone's property. So we all have a certain right. Okay, I'm not talking about it in private rights sense. Okay, let me explain to you what it is, how it is different. So for example, someone tries to kill you. Okay, someone tries to run you over. Okay, so you definitely suffer individually, don't you? You suffer individually, but imagine a society in which anyone's life can be so easily terminated by others. So it's not just a threat to the individual's life, liberty, but to everyone else's, to the societies collectively. Okay, so if the situation is of that nature, if the fact is of that nature, then the right that we are talking about are essentially public rights, and the duty which is correlated to that right will also be public duty. Okay, so all the crimes that you study in Indian Penal Code. Okay, those are there is a right which is violated. Of course, it is most often it is violated as against the individual, but the society is also as much concerned about it. Okay, so for example, someone steals your property. Okay, of course you suffer individually, with no denying that. But imagine a society in which this could happen to everyone. So it is also a threat to the general society. Okay, so such rights, okay, along with being also your individual right, are also public rights. Okay, that public peace is not disturbed, that public tranquility, order not disturbed, okay, and then the correlative duty that one has, okay, will be a public duty, okay. So that's essentially the distinction here. In case of tort, the right which is infringed is a private right, whereas in case of crime, the right which is infringed is a public right. So I hope this is clear. Is it clear so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So next, compensation. Okay. So in case of tort, because it is a civil wrong. Okay. For civil wrong, people are not put behind bars. Okay. There are certain exceptional situations where it happens. No denying that. Okay. But for civil wrong, generally, okay, there is one is not put behind the bar. Okay. So what happens? Okay, if a civil wrong is committed, what is the outcome? You guys already know it. In case of tort, it is a compensation which is an unliquidated damages. Whereas in case of crime, the outcome is a punishment by the state. Okay, it is not punishment by individual. So if you're if you are hurt or if your property is stolen, you do not get to flog the other person. Okay, that is also not allowed. Okay, so some punishment is given, imprisonment, okay, other penalty, whatever it is, okay, is imposed by the state. Okay. Torts, yes, I told you, tort is not just about compensation. Okay, so your very interesting question, can torts have remedies other than compensation? So compensation is not the only one. Okay, so as I told you, sometimes you can also under specific relief act. Okay, for example, you can seek remedy from the court. What kind of remedy? Prevent the person from committing a tort. Okay, so you might also seek injunction from the court. Okay, prevent someone from committing some tortuous act. Okay, so that is also there. But generally, the idea is that in case of civil wrong, the remedy will be in the form of compensation, which is an unliquidated damages. As opposed to that, in case of crime, it is punishment. Okay. However, even in case of crime, okay, sometimes court may order to pay compensation to the party that suffered. Okay, so in CRPC, if you look at section 357, it talks about from whatever the penalty is imposed, okay, fine that is imposed, okay, a part of it is to be directed to be paid to the party that suffered. Okay, so it is broadly that's the distinction, but then you see a little bit of deviation here and there as well. Okay, so essentially the idea is that even if it is some kind of fine that is imposed, okay, it is still a kind of punishment. Okay, whereas in case of tort, it is in the form of compensation of unliquidated damages.
So
yes.
So if we are suing someone in civil court, can we put them behind bars?
No, that's what I said. Okay, the idea is that the broad principle that we have is that in civil matters, okay, no one should be put behind bars. Okay, imagine of this situation: a person who's very poor borrowed money from someone, is unable to return it. Okay, then what happens? Okay, that poor person should be imprisoned. We don't say that. We don't.
Yes, no.
We wouldn't want to live in a society in which something of that sort happens. But then in England, under the court of equity, okay, under the equity jurisdiction of court, okay, which is a civil jurisdiction, not a criminal jurisdiction. Okay, historically it has been the case that one person could be put under the threat of being imprisoned so as to compel that person to fulfill some civil duty. Okay, so there we have such examples as well. Okay, even under CPC you will find provisions, okay, that you will be taught later on, that for example a judgment debtor, okay, can be compelled through these punitive mechanisms so as to perform his part of the contract. So this is something that we have inherited from that equity jurisdiction in case of England. Okay, but this is a rarity. It's not every day that you hear of something like that. But now don't equate it with, for example, big fraudsters, okay, who are taking loans from the bank, then fleeing this country. That's not merely a civil wrong. That also also has a criminal nature to it. Okay, so we quite often use the word, white collar crimes, etc., etc. Although they seem to be of proprietary nature, but those are much more than mere infringement of civil rights. Okay, those are definitely criminal acts. So in those cases, punishment is obviously there if they're of criminal nature. Okay, but in civil matters, we don't put people behind the bar. Okay, except when you need it to compel someone to do something. So is that clear? Was I able to explain this to you? So you will study in CPC later on. Okay, that generally that's not what we do. Okay, so for example, you can have any other form of remedies. So, as I said, it could be damages that you are compelled to pay. It could be any other sort of, except for damages compensation, it could be a specific performance of contract in case of contract. It could be injunction, okay, from, preventing a person from doing something or compelling persons, into doing something. So many things could be there, okay, but punishment is in case of, civil wrong is a rarity, okay. But if you look at section 51 to 59, okay, rules 30, 41, or 21, it deals with arrest and detention of the judgment debtor in civil prison, okay. But that's a rarity, let me tell you, okay. It is there, but it's not an essential feature of civil wrongs, okay. At the end of the day, even when you are imprisoned, you are detained, okay, it is to compel you to do your part of the to perform your, if there is judgment against you, okay, if you're the judgment debtor, you are compelled to perform that. That's essentially the purpose for which it exists, okay. Otherwise, it's not really the case, okay. So I hope this is clear, okay. Now next is, in case of tort, okay, who brings the action before the court, okay? It is the person whose right is breached, okay? It is the person whose right is infringed. So, for example, I have been defamed, or my property has been trespassed, okay? Or someone is causing nuisance that affecting me. In all such case, since my private rights have been violated, so I will be the one who will bring an action before the civil court, okay? The injured party brings it. Whereas in case of crime, okay, it is always brought by the state, because the interest is of the state, okay, in the protection of public rights, okay, in the upholding in compelling someone to perform the public duties, okay. So yes, such matters are brought by the state. So usually you will see in civil cases, okay, that it is X versus Y, whereas in case of crime it is state versus someone. Yes. There was a question.
So I was asking a question. So, like, in case you are not, like, I was defamed and I'm not able to go to a court. So,
sorry. Can you repeat that again?
Yes, sir. So, like, for example, like, I was defamed and I was unable to go to court. So, can anyone else on behalf of me can go to the court?
No, see, the thing is, unless you are incapacitated. So, in such case, someone else can. So, for example, if you are a minor, if you're lunatic or etc., in such case someone else can go on your behalf. But if you are capacitated, okay, if you have the legal capacity, then it has to be you. Others do not have the locus standi. Unless that person is not in the capacity, then someone else can go on behalf. So guardians, for example, can go on behalf of minor child. So that's the case. Otherwise, if it is your right that has been infringed, then you go. But then remember, in our constitution, certain very specific remedies have been provided to you. So, for example, 32, 226, okay, in case your fundamental rights are violated, you can go to the court, okay. But you know that in those cases, the idea of locus standi has been expanded, okay. So if a matter is of general public concern, okay, not just that, okay, it's a matter of right as well, fundamental right as well. In such case, someone else can go on behalf of someone else. So you will read many such cases. So for example, people who are bonded laborers, okay, they are not able to bring the matter on their own. So someone who is publicly minded person can also bring a litigation before the court under this specific jurisdiction of the court, okay. So in those public interest litigation, as you know, okay, in those matters, okay, there is a deviation from the idea of locus standi, okay. But in all other matters, if it is your right that has been breached, you have to go, Okay, is that clear? Unless you do not have the legal capacity, then of course someone else will represent you. So that's the case. Is that fine?
Okay, sir.
Samar?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I don't have much time. I think past the time. Okay. So one last thing. Okay, that will.
So can you explain the similarity between tort and quasi contract?
Tort and quasi contract. Yes, I'll come to that. Let me complete this one. Okay. The last thing is that this is nothing new. We discussed already that just the way same act same circumstances can lead to both tort and breach of contract. The same thing can also be said of crime. So for example, someone assaults you. That's a crime as well, and that's also a case of tort. Okay, but if the matter is taken up by the state, then the person will be punished. Okay, whereas if you take it to the civil court, then you seek compensation. Okay, the same happens in the case of defamation, mischief to property, etc., etc. Okay, so the same fact can lead to mobilization of different kinds of laws. Now, coming back to the question of similarity between tort and quasi contract, as we discussed earlier, it is that in case of tort, the duty is imposed by what? Is it based on promises? Is it based on agreement, the duty? In case of tort? No. Then where does the duty come from?
So the law.
Imposed by the law. The duty is imposed by the law. In case of quasi contract, was in the example that I gave you, was there an agreement between two different persons?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Then who imposes the duty? So, for example, under the law, in India we have Chapter 5 of Indian Contract Act that tells you about of certain situations. So 68, 69, 77, 71, 72 are the situations in which a relation that resembles that of a contract emerges, but not out of promises, not out of agreement. Okay, but this particular law imposes it. Okay, so quasi contract is also an outcome of imposition of law. Okay, it's not an outcome of promises or an agreement. Okay, so that's the similarity between tort and quasi contract. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then. So we have to end it today.